Our guest today is Moshik Kovarsky, one of the founding members of Project 315, Citizen for Truth in Israel. And here on Enters in the City, truth we always seek. In April 2021, parallel to the opening testimonial stage of former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, known by the nickname Bibi, trial, Guy Levy, Moshik Kovarsky, Dr. Adi Sasaber, and Moshe Malal established the volunteer-based Project 315. Its main purpose is to investigate the nature and content of 315 allegations in Bibi's case 4000 trial. The 315 charges, the number on which the project's name is based, of Netanyahu is related to him seeking to receive favorable coverage from the Israeli news portal Valor, which according to the case prosecution is a bribe. The Project 315 members discovered clear irregularities in the 315 accusatory points and saw it necessary to investigate the truthfulness and validity of the prosecution claim relating to this legal case. First to investigate the truthfulness of the 315 allegation was Guy Levy, an Israeli entrepreneur and social activist who was later joined by Adi, Moshik, and Moshek. Moshik, who is here with us today, is married, a father of 2 daughters, and a grandfather of 5. He has the rank of a major in the Israeli army and won prizes for his intelligence work, also won the Rothschild Award for Industrial Development, and volunteers much of his time, among which to teaching mathematics in high school. Moshik is also the chairman of the Atlas Committee that is in charge of finding the best high-tech companies in Startup Nation Israel. And he also himself finalized 2 successful startup companies, venture capital exit. Welcome, Moshik, to Enters in the City. We are so happy to have you here. It was very hard to coordinate it, but finally we are here.
We did it. Welcome, Moshik, to our show. Both Eti and I have really looked forward to this interview, which is so crucial to Israel's democracy. As you may know, over the past few years, the American people have experienced the, quote, Trump derangement syndrome, which Eti and I thought was unique to America, but apparently no more. After reviewing and reading all the material about Project 315, we now believe that Israel has a, quote, Netanyahu derangement syndrome. The political media outlet in Israel that worked for years on crushing Benjamin Netanyahu from his premiership career are now not sleeping at night because 4 Israeli citizens, you being one of them, Moshik, are determined to speak the truth and show all the contradictions in Netanyahu's indictments. Hence, Project 315 was born. Moshik, can you please tell our viewers in more detail, what is Project 315?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Eti, Karen. Very pleased to be here. So in order to understand what Project 315 is, we need to go a little further to the actual indictment, how it came to be, and why, as you mentioned, there is definitely a Netanyahu derangement syndrome in Israel, and how the legal system and the media cooperated in order to prosecute Benjamin Netanyahu and put him on trial. So we should go back, the roots go way back, but we will concentrate on elections 2015, when Netanyahu was elected against all odds. There was a pretty good assessment that he will not survive this election against, at that time, the current president of Israel, Bougie Herzog and Tzipi Livni, but he won decisively and formed a government. And at that time, a lot of people in the media, which did their best to prevent his election, came to the conclusion that the people's choice will not help them. The people will choose Netanyahu. So the only way to depose him is to apply the legal system in order to create all kinds of allegations against him. And that's how it started with, first of all, articles in the newspaper that blamed him in all kinds of things, and then leakage of data to the police, and then articles why the police is not investigating, and then a very dubious means in order to convince people in his surroundings to become state witnesses. I mean, when I'm telling you all these things, it all sounds familiar, right? Because you had exactly the same thing on your side of the pond. So that process took about 2 years. In 2018, after a lot of investigation, they announced that they signed 3 of the closest people to Netanyahu to become state witnesses, people that actually spent with him 24 hours, people that helped him. Now we know the methods they used in order to convince them to be witnesses, including sexual extortion, including threats of ruining their families, including physical tortures, including threats. It's all being recorded and actually included in a very detailed 222 pages request that the lawyers of not Netanyahu, the person who is sued together with him, has been submitted to court to consider whether the whole trial has to be nullified. So the goal of the legal system was not to go to trial with Netanyahu. The goal was to convince him to withdraw politics. If he would have taken this, and that was suggested to him in articles in the newspapers, then they would probably put off for the whole trial and the whole indictment, and it wouldn't come to be. All they wanted him is to be out because he was the main barrier for the deep state to take over the country. But he didn't succumb to this. He didn't agree to retire. He continued. 2018, the 70th year of Israel, was probably the best year of Israel geopolitically. If you recall, that was the year that Trump has moved the embassy to Jerusalem. That was the year that he withdrew from the Iran deal based on the nuclear archive that Netanyahu with the Mossad has brought from Tehran. That was the year that the Palestinians, the PLO was marginalized, and the actual step started for what later on has become the Abraham Accord. So 2018 was a great year for Israel, and that was really Netanyahu's goal. Netanyahu is there not for personal reasons. He really sees himself as someone who protects Israel's status in the world. And that's why he is fighting so hard. Now, in 2019, February, if you recall, Netanyahu was in the States, and at that time, Mandelblit, who is the Attorney General in Israel, chose while Netanyahu is on a very crucial mission in the state to announce. Sorry, I'm confusing with 2020. Take it back. 2019. 2019, there was an election, another election, in April 2019. For 100 days before the election, the media was full with vicious leaks from the investigation. Every such leak is a felony punishable by 3 years in prison. Mm-hmm. And the material, all the investigations material was not at the hand of the lawyers yet. The only people who held this material was the police and the Justice Ministry. And every day you could read actual excerpts from the investigations in the paper. They did their best to cause him to lose this election, the 2019. And yet, with all these vicious leaks, and with the fact that in February 2019, the Attorney General announced that he is going to submit an indictment against Netanyahu, subject to a hearing, to a pre-hearing, something kind of similar to a grand jury in the state. But that didn't help them. Netanyahu got, the right-wing bloc got actually 65 blocks out of 120. Mm-hmm. But then Avigdor Lieberman has decided, his small party, 5 members, has decided to go left. And then Netanyahu with 60 members couldn't form a government. But he stayed transitory prime minister further on. But obviously, if they didn't do all these leaks, then Netanyahu would win much more than 60. That's obvious to anybody who looks at it. Many people were convinced at the time that there is something to these allegations. Now a lot of people have changed their mind, but at the time, that was the only data they worked by, what was leaked to the press.
Now, what leaked to the press was the allegations, what was leaked to the press?
The actual transcripts of investigations from the police this is total no-no.
So now I want to ask you, so that's how 315 started?
Not yet, not yet, not yet. It's a long story.
No, I was just like...
But it's important to understand the basics. We came to be 2 years later. That was 2019. We started in 2021.
And is it because there were 315 indictments?
Not yet.
We're going to let it continue.
I'll promise. So at that time, that was just a preliminary indictment. It didn't have not many details. It was just general statements. And for that, Netanyahu had to defend himself with a hearing, which was held in October 2019. By the way, he enlisted to this some major legal names from the state, like Alan Dershowitz or other people. And they said that never anywhere a politician was put on a trial for bribe for favorable coverage. This is like totally takes away from the whole issue of politics and media, because every politician everywhere all the time is looking for favorable coverage. Absolutely. So to say that receiving favorable coverage is a sort of a bribe, not money, favorable coverage is kind of ridiculous. And they brought legal scholars to tell that to the prosecution in Israel, and they didn't want to hear them. They hardly gave them the time of day because they were so deadlocked on prosecuting him. Now they wanted to prosecute him on 3 indictments. The major one, they called it by numbers. They started numbering them 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. It was all intentional to create to the public the atmosphere like there'll be 5 and 6 and 7, like Netanyahu is the biggest criminal ever created. 4,000 was the major one because it involved this favorable coverage that he received from a very marginal website called Valor, for in return that he did some actions in favor of the owner of Bezek. Bezek is the biggest communication company in Israel, which owns Valor. So he was blamed that he gave him some special favors in return for these articles in Valor. That was 4,000 indictment. 2,000 was very ridiculous. It involved a call that Netanyahu actually recorded between him and the editor of a major newspaper in Israel, Yediot Aharonot. His name is Noni Moses, which they also say that he was offered a bribe in the form of favorable coverage, and he didn't report it to the authorities. That is the blame. Not that they say in the indictment that he didn't intend to take this offer, but the fact that he didn't report it by itself is a crime. And the 1,000 indictment has to do with relations he had with, you probably know the name, Arnon Milchan, the major film producer, was a billionaire, and another Australian mogul named James Packer. So the relation between him and these 2 gentlemen, according to the prosecution, forms an unqualified relations or not a good relation. I don't know how to say it exactly. But put that aside, that's just a lot of yellow stuff. The major one was 4,000. 4,000, even the Attorney General said if 4,000 didn't exist, this issue with Walla and the favorable coverage, he wouldn't have put the trial at all. So that was the major. So continue on the timeline. After the hearing, that was, we're talking about beginning of 2020. Remember almost the Corona time, the COVID time. Netanyahu on January 28th was in the White House. He was there to announce together with President Trump the deal of the century. And you all remember that, very momentous event. I, for one, believe that the deal of the century is not dead. It will be revived one day. It's the only realistic vision for our region, but we'll talk about it maybe later a little bit. But at the same time that Netanyahu is in the White House, listen to that, split screen in Israel. the Attorney General couldn't help it. He had to announce at exactly the same time when Netanyahu is abroad,
I remember
that he has decided to submit the indictment against Netanyahu finally after the hearing. So that was one of the most vicious things ever done. I remember I couldn't fall asleep that night. It was so infuriating. The fact that Israel is on the brink of achieving something so great.
Beautiful, right.
And then at the same time, the Attorney General is choosing to put him on trial. He couldn't wait for a day or two until he comes back to Israel and can defend himself. It was so despicable, no words. So after
you know
that,
what's funny, Moshik, that even people here that we know that tend to be more to the left and against Bibi Netanyahu really spoke against what happened that day. And there's even the people that really don't like Bibi said that that was such a dirty, and not just for Bibi, even for Israel, to take such a moment and tint it with such a...
I'm glad you're saying this because I didn't know it was felt abroad too, but in Israel, it was like the most infuriating things. And then, as always, there were the people on the other side who were very happy. I mean, Netanyahu's derangement syndrome. No, maybe I should call it Bibi derangement syndrome, BDS. You know, BDS is like dual meaning. But just came up with it. Maybe I'll use it.
The BDS.
You heard it first on the Yentas.
Yes.
So going forward, COVID hit us, everybody, right? And then they came out with this theory that Netanyahu is actually blowing up COVID out of proportion in order to stop his trial. I mean, now when we look back, we see how ridiculous that is, but actually people here, professors in universities, people who probably wouldn't say that they are dumb in general, saying that Netanyahu invented COVID in order to stop his trial. And then, of course, you know, they closed all the court systems in Israel, like everywhere else. You know, they closed all the public events. And they all say that he's doing it in order to stop his trial.
I guess it backfired on them when the entire world was sick with COVID and Israel was the first ones.
Rest assured, none of them is going to admit their mistakes. They never do. But the trial started on May 2020. And the first stage was for the defense, when it finally got all the material, to come up with its claims about the illegality of some of the indictment. And now we're coming to the 315 finally, because one of the things that the defense said to the court, it said many things. And the request from the court to the prosecution was to make like 30 changes to the indictment because it was so flawed. But one of the major changes that they said was that they're talking in general that he got favorable coverage, but they don't specify where, when, what events. Where was the favorable coverage? Exactly. You can't just say it in general.
So they don't have anything to back up their allegations?
So they were pressed to do it in a very short time. And what they did is they went to the role of messages of the general manager of Valor, of this website, a guy named Ilan Yeshua. They looked at his messages, not with Netanyahu, because Netanyahu, he never spoke with Netanyahu, but he spoke with the owner of the website, this guy, Shaul Alovich, who was also the owner of Bezek. And between them, there were messages that Alovich told him, take out this article, add this article, or something like this. And based on this, they created 315 items, an appendix to the indictment, that included 315 items marked with date and subject, etc., where an article was added, an article was deleted, an article was changed, etc. And most of them, it says that it was requested by Netanyahu. That's what
it's very customary, you know, crazy that is, Karen. It's customary that when you have a paper or any news channel, that the owners, the editors will have a normal communication of taking certain things out.
Of course, of course.
And you said that you never spoke to neither one of them?
Alovich did speak to Netanyahu in several occasions, but they were friends in general. both the wives and them. But the general manager, he was, later on we discovered in the trial that he was the strongest person in the website. The owner didn't really have much to say. It was all the general manager, which was a Bibi hater. And he never spoke to Netanyahu. He never spoke to him at all. He never spoke to Sarah Netanyahu. In the trial, there was a funny part where people who worked for Ilan Yeshua actually said that they heard Sarah Netanyahu yelling at Yeshua, at the general manager, on the phone. And then when Yeshua testified, he said that he never talked to her. So basically it was like he told them that she's calling him to yell, and it was like persuasion. They decided that they heard it, but they never heard it because it never happened. But the 315 items were all kind of in the same format. A request to add an article about Sarah Netanyahu visiting the party of the firemen, charity party of the firemen. This was requested by Netanyahu. That was like the format. There was one item that caught the eye. That was a little bit later, in about April 21, and now we're coming to the 315 project. Guy Levy, my partner, he looked at this list of 315. He also read what the defense has submitted as their answer to the indictment. And he looked at the 315 items, and one thing caught his eye. That was an article, a request to publish that Sarah Netanyahu was chosen to be the most influential woman in Israel by Forbes magazine.
Right.
So he remembered that he saw this article in many other places, not just in Walla. So he went to investigate it, and he found out that it was published in all the major papers, and because it's a news item, and also in Walla. And in Walla, actually, they added some remarks which kind of put Sarah Netanyahu down. They call her like a black hole and something like this. So he saw that at least one item out of the 315 is false, because there's nothing unusual in publishing something that was published in major international newspaper when it's published in everywhere. Probably some PR person sent it to all the newspaper editorial in order to publish it. And he said, maybe it's not the only one that's flawed, maybe there are others. But because there's so many of them, he called me and said, let's form a body of volunteers that will go over all the 315 items and find out how many of them are really justified.
And hence your dream team was born.
Exactly, that was it. So long story to come to your original question. Sorry about that, but you have to understand the background.
No,
Thank you.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. No, if you want to ask, it's okay. I can continue describing.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so we formed a group. Originally, it was like 50 volunteers. It grew up to 100 over. We added Dr. Adi Saba, which is a dear friend of mine now, and I didn't know her before. And she is a real addition to the team. And we added Moshe Malal, who also contributed a lot. He's a IT person. And together we started to concentrate all the data. We gave everybody a template to fill. We told them what they should look for. And we summarized it all in a form of Excel. And then we went to the press with the findings. So just to give you the bottom line, what we saw that, first of all, out of the 315, 136, which is 43%, never really happened. I know this sounds shocking. Like it says, a request to remove an article from the website, the request was answered. But the article,
43% was made up?
Yeah.
Never even existed.
Let me qualify that.
There was falsehood to it. It never even happened.
It never happened. I mean, maybe there was an internal messaging between the people, but they never fulfilled the request, if there was any. Because
I want to ask you something, Moshik. When you first investigated it and you came up with all these findings, did the legal team of Bibi Netanyahu, did they ever contact you to get
So
some of your...
we contacted them. They didn't contact us. They don't seek from us to do anything, but when we find something interesting, we send it to them and they decide whether they want to use it or not. It has a great defense team. They did some of the work by themselves, but in this particular area, not so much for the extent that we did. So some of the material we gave them in this area and in other areas as well, and hopefully they use it. They're not calling us and giving us tasks.
I want to ask you something. The justice system here in the United States, if you have a case like this, and there is so many indictments that are not true, that are untrue, the court will look at it, and the way, if we should take it to court, is the cost versus the benefit to society. You know, Karen and I watched almost all the videos that you have on your website. And what went through my head is, you know, Israel is not a very wealthy country, you know, like we don't have unlimited resources to, you know, especially with all these elections, we spend a lot of money.
Sure.
How come the court, what is your explanation? Why did the court not just say, look, this is ridiculous? Like today I was sitting in the car with Karen and I was telling her about the champagne and the cigars, and Karen goes, what's wrong with it? He's the prime minister. And I said, you know what, Karen, you're right. In most countries, it will, even in our country, it should be nothing. You know, you have a prime minister who orders cigars. Right. Big deal. Like it would not even be an item here.
Exactly. It makes me think of here how things are thrown out for being what's called a frivolous lawsuit.
Yes. So you're absolutely right in everything you say. And we ask ourselves the same question. We have calculated in our team, by the way, other than the 315 project, we're working with another group, which is called the Open Studio, which include an ex-Army, Super Army commissioner, not Army, sorry, police commissioner, and a very reputable reporter. And together we calculated the costs of these trials. It's amazing. It's actually touching something between $100 to $200 million.
Oh my God.
Investigated in these trials. I mean, you have to understand that at one point, the whole investigative unit of the police called LAV 433, it's like the Israeli FBI, there were hundreds of investigators working, you know, hundreds just to indict Netanyahu. There were dozens and dozens of prosecutors. They all get hefty salaries, and they send them all over the world to do some legal findings in Panama, in Sri Lanka, in Australia.
I think somebody else needs to be indicted.
That's what we're saying, you know, investigate the investigators, because there are a lot of things here which are cannot be put down to negligence only. There was an intention here to indict him. And all this money could have spent on much better goals like fighting real crime.
Yeah.
But you asked about the judges, why they don't throw it out of court. And we ask ourselves that, well, it seems like, and I say it very carefully, it seems like that the judges themselves are afraid. They're afraid of the media backlash. They're afraid for their advancement in the court system.
Well, we saw it similarly here with Trump. Even people that support, a lot of people, especially in the entertainment, because I've been in the entertainment industry for many years, and a lot of people that came into my office said, you know, we support Trump and we're going to vote for him, but we're never going to say it publicly. They were so, and I said, why not? They said, we're going to lose contracts over this.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Here too, even though I can sense a little bit of change of tune in the last, I mean, part of it, we take a little bit of credit for this change of mind that people have gone through about the trial, about the fact that they thought before Netanyahu is corrupt and now they changed their mind. Because after we came out with the 315 and we went to the media and we presented our findings, at first they totally put us down, you know, who are these people? They are not lawyers. And we said, you know, in order to determine that when you say an article was removed and it's still there, you don't need to be a lawyer. Now, any person can do that. And
but I want to ask you, I know any person can do it, but what is the background of each of you? I know your background. Can you tell me a little bit, like really touch really quick about the background of the 4 founders of the Project 315?
Right. So Guy Levy is a marketing person. He has a successful company, and he takes his time to do this. Dr. Adi Sabo is a psychologist. She has a PhD in psychology. And in the past, she were more active in this field. Now she is more devoted to this. Moshe Malal is an IT person, as I mentioned. He works, for a living. It's all a total volunteer work that we do. And after we showed this, the trial started. The actual trial, the hearing started on April 21, and it's still going on. We're talking about a year and a half now of testimonials. And at one point, when the issue of Walla and the favorable coverage has backlash, and by the way, they don't call it any more favorable coverage in the indictment. They call it unusual access, like
VIP access to the media.
Right. And you ask, what is usual? They never checked what is usual. So they say it's unusual, but they never say what is
what
usual.
Is the usual?
Wow.
And after that, when that kind of fell through, they went to the other side, like the action that Netanyahu did for Shaul Alovich in Bezek. And that was a real farce, because what they counted on is that very few people will understand the regulatory process and the whole business side of what he did. I won't go into this, it's too complex, but it's all about relations between Bezek and its subsidiaries and the broadcast systems and competition and fiber optics and etc. But we cracked it, because I come from a business background and I formed companies and I know how mergers go and what is the mergers and takeovers, etc. And I went into the financial documents and I made it accessible to people to understand, me and not only me, other people as well, how farcical this whole allegation is. Netanyahu was busy with thousands of things as a prime minister. And to think that he would be involved in such minute details, he basically, all he wanted was Netanyahu, and that's why they got him, because he wanted free market of opinions. That is that, like in the state, you have Fox News. 20 years ago, you didn't have Fox News. It was all monolithic, left, biased, liberal. And in Israel, the same thing. He wanted very much to open the media market so everybody can broadcast. And that went against the grain of all the traditional players in this market. He didn't care about all the regulation of, just communication and the fiber, etc. That was not his concern. But
they fair and balanced coverage.
That's what he wanted. Yes, fair and balanced coverage for real. Everybody can open a channel and broadcast, and they're against it. But we went and cracked the other side of the deal, the 4,000 indictment deal, what he supposedly gave, and proved there too, together with the defense, of course, that, well, I should say this way, the defense proved that there was nothing there. We made it more accessible to the public. We explained to them what the defense is doing. And through broadcasts that we do daily when the trial is on, like now in Israel, it's 8:30 in the morning, in an hour and a half, I'm going into a live broadcast where we are broadcasting directly from the trial in Jerusalem. We have, this is an initiative of a lawyer named Kinneret Barashi. She started this together with the investigative reporter, Eli Tzipori. Eli is sitting in court and reports to her through WhatsApp, to her and to me, all that's going on in the court. You're actually typing what's going on because they don't allow to broadcast the trial. That's another false. Netanyahu demanded that the trial will be broadcast so everybody can see how far-fetched everything is. They didn't allow it.
So, of course, because then how can they lie?
Right. They thought that they'll send,
Because it's going to be in the favor of Bibi if they broadcast it, and
right. So instead of sending, the usual suspects, all the reporters that were there to indict him in the first place.
But is that a customary thing in Israel that trials are not broadcast, or is
Yes.
it in his specific case?
It's customary. They can make exceptions. Like if you recall, there was the trial in Israel of John Demeniuk.
Right.
So that was broadcast live. So they can open it if they wanted to, but they did not. They did not want to.
Well, somebody like a former prime minister, I think the people should be able to watch the trial.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. And he wanted it. He wanted it to be broadcast. They didn't let him.
But the fact that he wanted it shows that he has nothing to, in my opinion.
Nothing to hide.
But
yeah, he wanted the hearing to be public as well. The hearing, and they dismissed it completely. Now, so Eli is reporting it through WhatsApp to Kinneret and to me, and we have a live studio, and it broadcasts through YouTube and through Facebook and Twitter, and we are being watched by tens of thousands of people every day. People are addicted to it, and that's how the truth is filtering out. That every time they bring a witness, the witness is telling a story in the direct examination for 3 hours, and then they start cross-examining, and everything falls apart because it all words that they just fed him to say, and now it all against the evidence, it doesn't stand.
Wow.
So this whole process is so important in order to expose the truth, and there's a bigger picture here because exactly just like in the States with Trump, and the same thing here, you can see how the legal system, how the deep state, together with the media, is trying to put its hand on the scale of the political process. And that's very, very dangerous.
absolutely. I want to ask you, Moshik, many of us believe that the Oslo Accords were deeply flawed. Israel made enormous concessions and in return did not get the peace that we were seeking. Mm-hmm. They gave Yasser Arafat a world stage and a world recognition. They gave the Arabs weapons, they gave them money, they allowed them to have a form of an army. The recent Abraham Accords is the beginning of dismantling the Oslo Accords, a goal Netanyahu set up to achieve. I personally believe that had Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu remained in office, they would have continued with this mission, not only continued and succeeded further with end result that would not only be good for the entire world, Israel, but for the entire world, specifically the Middle East. Unfortunately, the process of doing away with the Oslo Accord was not completed because both leaders did not win the re-election. The newly formed Israeli government, as we watched the past month, seems to be heading back to the dangerous path of the Oslo Accords years ago. What does it mean for Israel if Netanyahu does not win the upcoming November elections? And also, his driver just recently, yesterday, I think, testified. Do you think his testimony is going to affect the election?
Which testimony? Sorry, the last one?
The driver. I heard that Bibi,
the driver. Driver, yes. Hassan. Okay, let me address the first question first because it's the most important one I think that we should ask because Israel is facing a major decision point. Fortunately for us, we are not stuck for 4 years with the same person, and the government that was appointed a year and a half ago has fell apart because of its bad actions. And Naftali Bennett, who was the prime minister for a year, just left power to Yair Lapid, who indeed, as you said, is taking us in a very, very bad way. And if he continues to be the prime minister after November, I see very bad things happening to Israel and to the region. We already see it. We already see the surrender to Hezbollah really in Lebanon with the gas deal. We see a lack of action against Iran, and we don't see any advancement in the area of the Abraham Accords vis-a-vis, for example, Saudi Arabia. So I know there are mixed feelings about Saudi Arabia, but where we are in this region, if Trump and Netanyahu would continue, I have no doubt that the Abraham Accord would be extended to include Saudi Arabia as well. So hopefully many Israelis see that. One of the major achievements of Netanyahu, it took him many years, and with the assistance of Donald Trump, he managed in, as I said, 2018-19, after also, especially after Mike Pompeo has become the Secretary of State, to marginalize, to take out the veto power of the Palestinians over the whole Middle East peace process. And that's how Abraham Accord should be viewed. We were able to make peace with the Arab countries, with peace-seeking Arab countries like the Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco and Sudan, despite the fierce veto of the Palestinians. If you recall, John Kerry, before the Obama administration was finished, he gave a speech and he said, that will never happen. No Arab country will make peace with Israel unless the Palestinian problem is resolved. And he was proven wrong by Trump and Netanyahu. So I think this process can continue. I think it can happen together with the deal of the century. We don't have probably time to discuss this. We can do another broadcast, hopefully, after the—
Absolutely. I'm going to hold you up to it right after the election.
Yes, we'll definitely have to reconnect.
Yeah, I hope I'll be in a good mood to come.
Yes, I hope so. I hope so too.
Yeah. So, but that all coupled together, and it can be put together by a wise Israeli prime minister like Netanyahu. Now, you asked about the driver. Look, the whole thing, I'll give you why I think this whole 1,000 indictment, the cigars, the champagne, is so faulty. Yesterday, it was discovered in court that the police had a warrant to search through the phones and the computers of this person, Jonathan Hassan, the driver. They had a warrant and they never fulfilled it. They had a warrant also for the secretary of Milchan, a lady named Adas Klein, to search her computers and phone. They never did it. Why? If they, let's say, if the allegations are true and cigars and champagnes in fantastic quantities, I mean, they're talking about more than 1,000 bottles of champagnes that were delivered to the prime minister's house. I mean, this is like science fiction. Think about it for a moment. Wouldn't there be any messages, WhatsApp messages like—
It could have been worse. They could have said that he's selling them right now. That he opened the factory, you know.
But think about it. They would find messages between Klein and the driver telling him, take a box and take it to Netanyahu, right? Some messages, some traces for this. This all doesn't happen in thin air. They don't say pigeons. There are WhatsApp messages, calls, mails, right? But there's nothing. They never search for it. And it begs the question, why didn't they search for it? A, maybe they didn't want to have to find something, not to find it, and then they say we didn't find it. Or secondly, they would find something that will totally create a different path that doesn't have to do with Netanyahu. Either or, it's a major negligence of the part of the police, and it shows an intention. I mean, they want to find Netanyahu guilty at all costs, so they don't search where there's something that can contradict them.
You know, this leads me to my next question. You know, Moshik, it's fair to say, if you don't like Netanyahu, you live in a democracy, you don't have to vote for him, but don't sabotage democracy. Let's talk about the real issue. Benjamin Netanyahu is not the issue, but he is considered the target. The real issue seems to be the dismantling of Israel's democracy using very dangerous methods. Can you please elaborate on these dangerous methods in order for our listeners to better understand these methods?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on the issue exactly. I mean, I don't have any quarrel with anybody who says, I don't vote for Netanyahu because I don't agree with him. It's fine. I mean, as you said, it's a democracy. But here, a lot of things were done which were totally against democracy. First of all, the systems themselves, the legal system is seeking power. Some people say, oh, the prosecution has many people with kippah, you know, they're religious, they're right wing. How do you say that they are left wing? No, I'm not saying they're left wing. I say that they are looking for their own power. And Netanyahu is seeking, and the Likud in general, and the right in general, is seeking to give the power back to the electorate, less to the actual functionaries in the government. I mean, you can see the same thing in the state, you know, talk about the swamp in Washington, and the people that don't feel their voice is being heard. Same thing in Israel. Netanyahu is speaking for the people, but the people that are now in power, the people in the corridors of the offices of the legal attorney, they want the power to stay with them, not to the people. They have disdain for the people. And that's what the real fight is, you know? In Israel, ministers and members of parliaments are living in fear. They're afraid that they're going to be prosecuted for the public actions. We have some laws that are called breach of contract, taken from the British legal system, which, by the way, changed it already, which actually gives a loaded gun to any prosecutor who wants to prosecute any public official for something which, in your eyes, may be totally within his domain. Like if he changed the law that says that we're going to reduce the purchase tax on apartment, they can say, oh, your daughter just bought an apartment, so we're going to sue you because you did it for her.
Talking about democracy, I know in the last month, what's his name? The senator, the New Jersey senator, Robert Menendez, I guess went up to Bibi Netanyahu and he kind of pressured him. And I just read it this morning. It pressured him that if he wins, that he should not appoint a prominent extreme right wing. He was talking about Ben Gvir, who is the chairman of the Otzma Yehudit party, which is running on a joint ticket with the Chinese, the religious Chinese party. So since we're here, I wasn't going to bring it up, but we were talking about democracy. And I thought it was funny the way, because Bibi is not scared of saying what he needs to say. He proved it. He said, I said to Menendez, are you talking to me about Ben Gvir, who believes in the state of Israel and supports IDF soldiers? I haven't heard a word about Defense Minister Benny Gantz and Prime Minister Yair Lapid partnering with Ramah, Mansour Abbas, and Muslim Brotherhood, who deny Israel as a Jewish state and go to the mourning tents of murderers of Jews. And then he said to him, we are a democracy. We will decide who will be in our government. And you know, when I read it this morning, it's not part of our question. I thought, I didn't think anybody else would say something like that to a senator who comes from the United States. And I think what's unique a little bit about Bibi is that he has the education and the background to answer in a very assertive way, yet politically correct where it's not. And I think that that's what we have now. We don't have enough people that have that kind of background.
I'll add to that. I fully agree with you. You know, on the side note, what if government of Israel would address Joe Biden and say, we want you to fire Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar from the Democratic Party, because, I mean, this is ridiculous between countries. But Netanyahu has the uncanny ability to be at home everywhere he is. He can be at home in the US Congress, making a grand entrance, and he can be at home in the market in Ramleh in Israel, going between the shopkeepers, you know, and being one of them. And he can go to a major university in Israel and be received in applause, even though they, on the side, they say they don't like him, but he makes a real good appearance.
There's no denying he's a pro.
He's a pro, but he also is driven. A lot of people think, you know, that Netanyahu is driven by his own ambition, personal ambition. Not true. he really sees himself as a savior of Israel in a very difficult time. And that's the only reason that drives him. He could have been a multimillionaire now, sitting, sipping cocktails somewhere, driving, flying first class and being in the best hotel and nobody would look in his plate. I mean, the ridiculous allegation. I mean, they went after him for the type of ice cream that he prefers.
For how many cigars he bought? Like, really?
Yeah, it's ridiculous how they try to nitpick on everything, on him, on his family. It's so ugly. It's so ugly the way the media is going through this. It's really derangement, you know. And the thing is, when you talk to people and say, let's talk about how Netanyahu has managed Israel to be an energy superpower in a world that so, you know, suffers from the energy crisis. He did it against all odds. I made a big research about this with Dr. Yuval Steinitz, who was the energy minister. We did a Twitter space and I interviewed him. It's a major achievement that Israel did, and all the people that are now in the government were against it at the time. They're trying to stop it. If they got their way, we would be today with skyrocketing electricity powers. We'd be today with very bad, much worse inflation, and we do have bad inflation, but not as other countries because of the gas discoveries. But when you want to discuss it with people, no, they want to stick to what Sarah did and what Yair did. And guys, this is not what deciding the fate of the country, you know.
Absolutely.
Do you want to ask the last question before we close?
Yes. Moshik, for several years, you admitted you were not a Netanyahu supporter. Like many others, you saw yourself as a victim to the results of being brainwashed by the left-leaning media that has been influencing the people for many years. If somebody of your caliber was a high rank in the Israeli army, the chairman of the Atlas Committee in charge of finding the best high-techs for Israel, if somebody of your caliber was able, because you're very educated, you're very smart, but yet the media affected you. You were brainwashed by the media. At what point did you change your mind? And what was the turning point? What made you realize, wait a minute, I need to question this?
This is interesting.
Your research, huh? Yeah, that was quite a long time ago. It was in the election of 1999.
Oh, wow.
If you recall, Netanyahu had two periods as a prime minister. The first one was 96 to 99. I voted for him in 96. And then he was young and a little bit inexperienced. He did a great thing to Israel. In retrospect, he changed the economy and he did major things, but he was less experienced about how to deal with the media and with the people around him. And Ehud Barak, which later on has won the dubious title of the worst prime minister for Israel ever, he came with a very strong campaign later on to discover to be with a lot of illegalities. And I supported, in 1999, I voted for Barak. I sadly say that I was affected by all the media smear about Netanyahu and his family. And I thought that the country needs a change. Boy, was I wrong, because Barak did everything wrong. He ran out from Lebanon, leaving our allies from the South Lebanese army stranded to the Hezbollah, and created the atmosphere in the Middle East that Israel is, as Nasrallah called us, a spider web that can be easily broken. And that brought about and then he went to Camp David with Clinton and Arafat, if I recall, and failed miserably, came back, and then they started the Intifada.
Right. You know what's ironic is that they attacked Bibi, and with the same weapons that they attacked Bibi, Barak actually gave them everything. And he couldn't achieve what Bibi achieved without giving what Barak. So Barak said, okay, well, we'll give them, but now they attack Bibi on his tactics and the way he handles things.
Right, no, there's a major difference between the approach of Barak and Netanyahu. Barak appears to be smart. By the way, you know that Barak was partner with with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes.
And it was all published after Epstein was indicted and was put on the sexual offenders registrar. So that, unlike others which were friends with Epstein before he was. And all this is kept, hush hush. People don't talk about it because it's not. It goes against the Bibi derangement syndrome. So I quickly realized that Barak is going to bring the country to a doom. And the second Intifada was really terrible years, started in 2000, in October of 2000, and lasted until like 2004. In the middle, Barak was deposed. Sharon became prime minister. You can read all about it in the book of Bibi, because it's telling about.
Oh, actually, that was our. We have it here. We just got it from Amazon. That was the ending of our show today.
I can't wait to read it.
So
let me make you jealous. I got one with a personal dedication from him.
Wow, I'm jealous.
So I think we should send this interview to Bibi and ask him for one too. No?
Yeah.
We can't do that because then they'll say that he bribed us to do this interview.
Oh, really? We'll end up in court for. That's a good one, Etty. That's a good one.
But anybody, for our viewers, we didn't read it yet. It got really good reviews. It's available on Amazon. Actually, it's on sale on Amazon right now. So if you want to read the book, we are going to read it this weekend. We were hoping to get it before the interview and be able to read it, but we didn't. That's for the interview.
This is for after the election. After the election.
Available on Amazon.
Leave it at top. Moshik, I wanted to tell you this was an amazing and an informative interview right before the November elections in Israel. I am sure you are all very busy these days, so we really want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us today. Yasher koach to you for seeking the truth and justice. We would love to interview you again right after the elections. Thank you again for joining us, and we wish you much success in your work, which is really a Kiddush Hashem. For all our viewers, if you want to learn more about Project 315, you can go on their YouTube channel and on their website. Etty and I were both fascinated and disturbed at the same time watching the videos. We really encourage everyone to watch them. And for our viewers who would like to buy the Benjamin Netanyahu book, Bibi, you can now find it on Amazon, as Etty said. We would like to thank all of our followers for listening to this episode. Please remember, you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Yentas in the City. You can also write to us at dearyentas@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you and answer your letters on our weekly advice column. We also want to thank our team for all the behind the scenes work. And we want to thank our sponsors, Soft Smart Systems International and Conquest Realty Investments. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. We have a lot more coming. Until next time, this is Karen Cohen and Etty Elkis, and we are Yentas in the City. Be safe, everyone, and remember to be the Ruth in the room. Thank you so much, Moshik.
Thank you so much.
And we can't wait to meet you in person.
We have another interview in 2 weeks. You know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For spreading the word. Bye-bye.